Spring 1945. The war is over, but the air in the British POW camp near Lübeck still smells of iron and disinfectant. A German nurse, barely 24, sits on a wooden bench, her hands trembling as a British medic hands her a small white rectangle wrapped in paper. The label reads Sanitary pad. She stares, brow furrowed, thinking it's a wound dressing. Around her, other captured women whisper, unsure whether to thank or refuse. The medic just nods, moving on to the next in line. No explanation, just a quiet, practiced kindness that unsettles them more than any interrogation ever did. She pinches the pad between her fingers, soft, clean, too clean. She remembers the field hospitals of the Eastern Front, mud, blood, torn uniforms used as makeshift bandages. Hygiene was a rumor there. Is this some kind of bandage? She finally asks in halting English. The British nurse beside her smiles faintly. Not exactly. That moment lands heavier than the word surrender. For years, propaganda had taught these women that British camps were cruel, that capture meant degradation. Yet here they were, handed personal care items more refined than anything issued by their own army. Reports estimate over 3 million German women displaced after the fall of Berlin, many ending up in Allied custody. None had seen anything like this before. The nurse turns the pad over, inspecting the soft gauze surface. They waste cotton on this, she murmurs to her friend. Cotton had been rationed for years, reserved for uniforms and medical gear. The British seemed to have an endless supply. Industrial abundance, visible even in the smallest detail. It wasn't victory paraded in flags. It was victory folded into everyday objects. Behind the medical tent, a British sergeant writes in his log, "Issued hygiene kits to female POW, astonishment noted." The understatement of the century. That astonishment wasn't just about the object itself. It was about the world it implied. A world where women's needs were acknowledged, even in captivity. As night falls, the German nurse hides the pad under her blanket, unsure if it's a trick or a gift. But as the lanterns dim, one question echoes through the barracks. If they treat us this humane, then what else did we get wrong about them? Tomorrow they'll learn the answer through shock, suspicion, and slow trust. Dawn breaks over the camp with the hiss of steam and the bark of orders. The German women are herded toward a line of makeshift tents marked medical processing. The air smells of carbolic soap and damp uniforms. A British corporal hands out ration cards, delousing powder and canvas bags labeled hygiene issue. Inside, a bar of soap, a comb, 2 cloth pads, and a toothbrush stamped RAF supply. The same toothbrushes Allied pilots used. The women glance at each other in disbelief. For years, even nurses in the Reich had washed with salt water and scraps of laundry soap. Now, inside enemy wire, they're being given more comfort than they ever saw in service. One whispers, "We are prisoners, yet treated like patients." Her voice cracks between gratitude and guilt. According to Red Cross data, each female POW received 2 to 3 personal hygiene items per week, an unimaginable luxury in post-war Germany. The British weren't showing off, they were following Geneva protocols to the letter. But to the captured women, it felt like stepping into another civilization. "Even our wounded didn't get this care," one of them mutters. The camp doctors move briskly, blood pressure checks. Vaccinations, clean bedding, everything efficient, impersonal, but strangely respectful. The guards avoid staring. Meals are served on metal trays instead of thrown into buckets. For women raised under militarized obedience, this kind of order, rooted in respect, not fear, creates dissonance they can't shake. At night, when the generators hum and the guards' boots fade down the gravel path, the women talk in whispers. Maybe they pity us. Maybe they want to show us up. But deep down, something else stirs, envy, the kind that comes when your enemy's decency exposes your own regime's neglect. A young POW scribbles in her diary, "They treat our bodies as if they matter." That sentence would have been unthinkable just months before. By the end of the week, the barracks smell of soap instead of sweat. The sanitary pads are no longer hidden. They hang from washing lines like flags of quiet rebellion. Yet with every small comfort comes a sting of shame. How could the people they'd been taught to hate see them so clearly and treat them so well? Tomorrow, a nurse will hand one woman a new pad and spark an argument that cuts to the core of belief itself. The argument begins with a single question. A British nurse, her sleeves rolled up, holds a white pad in one hand and gestures gently toward a group of German POW gathered by the infirmary tent. "This isn't a bandage," she says in slow, careful English. "It's for women's time." The women stare blankly. The translator hesitates before whispering in German, and suddenly a wave of murmurs ripples through the line. "For what? For that? Impossible." A few laugh nervously, others cross their arms, embarrassed. In Nazi Germany, open talk about menstruation had been treated as indecent, even dangerous. Pads were unheard of outside hospitals, tampons outright banned for civilians under purity regulations. Most women used rags or paper, some used nothing at all. Now, under British supervision, the taboo is being dismantled in real time. "They treat our blood as natural, not shameful," one whispers to another. Her voice trembles with confusion. The nurse demonstrates calmly, professional as ever, using a mannequin and simple instructions. No jokes. No smirks, just clarity. The women don't know whether to feel humiliated or liberated. A few turn away, cheeks flushed. Others lean closer, curiosity winning over pride. In that moment, the power dynamic flips not through violence, but through education. This wasn't charity, it was revelation. For the British, this was routine hygiene training. For the Germans, it was ideological demolition. What they're being shown isn't just a prod, it's a world. Where female bodies aren't political tools but biological facts. And that realization cuts deeper than any defeat on the battlefield. One POW hides her pad in her coat pocket, afraid that officers, or even fellow prisoners, will accuse her of moral weakness. She doesn't understand yet that this small piece of cotton symbolizes a future her government never imagined for her. Outside the tent, the British nurse lights a cigarette, exhaling slowly. They look at it like it's gold. She mutters to another medic. Inside, the German women still argue, maybe it's meant to shame us, maybe it's freedom. The pad, once mistaken for a bandage, now carries a new kind of wound, emotional, invisible and irreversible. But by nightfall, the fear takes a stranger turn. Rumors spread that these pads might not be what they seem. By the next morning, the barracks hum with whispers. Someone swears they overheard a guard saying the cotton pads are treated with chemicals. Another claims they're laced with sterilizing agents to stop reproduction. In a war built on propaganda and paranoia, truth is the last thing anyone trusts. "Don't use them," a woman hisses across her bunk. "They're trying to track us, it's poison." Another shakes her head but hides hers anyway. Fear spreads faster than lice. Within days, over half the women refuse their hygiene kits. The Red Cross clerk notes it dryly in his log. 70% of new arrivals declined issue. The irony bites hard. For years, these women had followed Nazi medical rules without question, injecting untested serums, enduring malnutrition, marching in mud with infected wounds. Yet now, given clean cotton and soap, they recoil. Not because of reason, but because the enemy made it. The British nurses are bewildered. One tries to explain again, using diagrams, calm voices, and patient smiles. "It's just absorbent cotton," she insists. The Germans exchange wary glances. "Maybe they want to make us weak." The camp's translator sighs. "They already have your guns," he replies. The tension peaks when a wounded POW, her arm bandaged from a shrapnel cut, runs out of clean gauze. She quietly unwraps one of the pads, presses it to her wound, and watches as the bleeding stops within minutes. The material works better than anything she's used before. Word spreads by nightfall, the poison cloth heals faster than official bandages. Paranoia gives way to reluctant respect. In her diary, she writes, "Perhaps not everything from the enemy is evil." A dangerous sentence in any ideology built on hate. The next day, she thanks the British nurse in broken English. The nurse nods, no triumph in her eyes, just fatigue and a quiet satisfaction. "You see, it's only cotton. The rumors fade, but something else remains, a fragile thread of trust." These small, sterile items start to bridge a moral canyon larger than any battlefield. And that bridge will only grow stronger when the Red Cross arrives to inspect the camps, bringing confirmation and a new kind of order. The trucks arrive at dawn, grey, mud-splattered, marked with the Red Cross that means both fear and salvation. The guards open the gates, and a team of inspectors steps out, clipboards in hand, accents crisp and neutral. The women watch from behind wire fences, their curiosity caught between hope and dread. They've heard rumors that the Red Cross will expose the truth about the pads. That maybe, finally, someone will explain why the British treat them this way. Inside the medical tent, the lead officer, a Swiss doctor named Keller, orders an audit. He checks the storerooms, opens supply crates, inspects the cotton pads under magnifying glass. Medical grade, he declares flatly. Sterile, nothing harmful. The British nurse lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. For her, it's protocol. For the women watching, it's revelation. Over 40 zero hygiene parcels were distributed across British POW camps in 1946, each item logged and accounted for. To the Red Cross, it was paperwork. To the prisoners, it was proof that dignity wasn't propaganda. They even count our pads like gold. A German woman mutters as the officers tick off inventory lists. The inspectors question a few prisoners directly. One younger woman blurts out, "Why do they give us these things?" Keller pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Because you are human," he says. Then he moves on, leaving a silence heavy enough to fill the tent. That single line spreads faster than any rumor. By nightfall, the phrase, "because you are human," echoes between bunks like a prayer and a punishment all at once. For women, raised under a regime that measured worth in obedience, not humanity, it's destabilizing. The Red Cross visit ends in order and calm. No punishments, no lectures, just more supplies distributed. More understanding built brick by brick. The next morning, the British nurses notice something different. When they hand out hygiene kits, the women accept them without hesitation. Trust, it seems, has a smell, the sterile, faintly sweet scent of cotton and soap. That night, as the camp generator hums, one of the women whispers, "They could humiliate us, but they don't." Another replies, "Maybe they're teaching us something." She's right. Tomorrow they will learn something even deeper, not about cleanliness, but about dignity itself. By the time the next week begins, the atmosphere inside the camp has shifted. The guards no longer bark, they speak. The women, once suspicious, now line up quietly each morning for inspection, not from fear, but from an emerging sense of order that feels strangely voluntary. The British nurse, the same one who first handed out the mystery pads, now moves through the rows with calm precision. She shows the women how to fold, fasten, and wash them, explaining in simple words and slow gestures. No mockery, no pity, just instruction. The German women watch her closely. One of them, a former army nurse, notices how the British woman's uniform sleeves are spotless despite hours of work. She moves like a teacher, not a victor. She murmurs, and that's exactly what shocks them most, the absence of dominance. The enemy doesn't gloat, she educates. By late 1947, records show over 90% of women in British-run POW camps had adopted regular hygiene routines based on Allied standards. To the bureaucracy, that's a statistic. To these women, it's transformation. Each small act of care, a bar of soap, a clean sheet, a sanitary pad, chips away at years of indoctrinated shame. One night, a British nurse overhears two prisoners arguing softly. they treat us like people. No, the other says, they treat us like women. Both statements are true and both feel revolutionary. In her notebook, the British nurse writes, teaching them hygiene is easy. Teaching them self-worth, that's the real work. She'll never send that note home. It'll stay tucked between ration reports and medical records. But its meaning lingers in every quiet exchange that follows. When one German woman thanks her in English, "You teach with respect," the nurse only replies, "Rules are rules." Yet everyone feels the weight of that line. In this camp, rules aren't tools of cruelty anymore. They're scaffolding for rebuilding what war tried to erase. As the nurse packs up for the night, the wind carries laughter from the barracks light, hesitant but real. The war has ended on paper, but here humanity is learning to breathe again, one careful lesson at a time. Tomorrow, that same laughter will echo through letters that will travel back into a broken Germany, carrying forbidden hope. By winter, the camp's fences no longer feel like walls, more like the frame of a strange temporary school. And like every class, lessons find their way home. The women begin to write. Pencil on thin paper, every word carefully measured to pass Allied censors. We are fed, we are clean, they treat us fairly, they write. But tucked between those lines, under the surface of politeness, something new flickers, quiet astonishment. One letter slips through censorship almost unchanged. It reaches Dresden 2 months later and stuns the woman's sister, who reads it aloud in a ruined apartment. They gave us a cloth that frees you. She can't explain it better than that. Not a weapon, not a ruse. Just an object that turns survival into dignity. In those months, Allied offices processed thousands of letters from female POW each week. Most contained nothing more dangerous than small truths: clean beds, decent food, respect. But even that was subversive. For years, Nazi propaganda had painted the enemy as monsters. Now, handwritten evidence was bleeding through ink and paper, saying otherwise. One British censor, reading a batch of letters, pauses at a line. Their nurses do not sneer. He circles it in red pencil and moves on, unaware that he's just preserved the first flicker of reconciliation woman to woman, not soldier to soldier. The German women in the camp begin helping each other write. Some can barely spell, others translate. "What do we call these?" one asks, pointing at a folded pad on the table. "Call it what it is," her friend replies. "Freedom." They laugh, not realizing that this tiny moment of humor, the first since surrender, means their healing. Evening falls. Letters are collected in canvas bags, stamped past by censor. The women watch them carried toward the trucks, unsure if their words will ever reach home. But they do, and with them travels a contagious curiosity. Soon, whispers will ripple through the ruins of occupied Germany, of enemy camps where women are treated with dignity, and of strange white bandages that symbolize something more dangerous than rebellion. Empathy and that curiosity, once unleashed, will change the home front itself. Spring 1948. The trains creak back into West Germany, bringing women who don't look broken anymore. Their uniforms are gone, replaced by patched civilian coats. But something else has changed: the way they walk, the way they meet eyes. In the ruins of Cologne and Hanover, they tell stories that sound like fantasy. The British gave us clean beds. They gave us cotton pads for us. Neighbors blink in disbelief. How could captors, the very people who bombed their cities, show more respect than their own commanders ever did? In kitchens with missing windows and stairwells coated in dust, these stories land like grenades of confusion. A former POW unwraps a small parcel, revealing a folded white pad she smuggled back, still pristine. They called it Sanitary. She says softly. Around her, women lean closer. One laughs bitterly. "We used newspaper and prayed it wouldn't show." The laughter dies quickly. Reports from occupation authorities confirm the shock. 1948 surveys found urban German women overwhelmingly astonished by Allied hygiene standards, from menstrual care to maternity wards. To them, the difference isn't just cleanliness, it's philosophy. The idea that women's pain is ordinary, not taboo, Across towns, quiet conversations begin. Maybe we were wrong about them. Maybe we were wrong about everything. A dangerous idea in a country still trying to rebuild its pride. One returning nurse recalls how the British treated infections without shouting, without punishment. They lost comrades, yet they still treated us kindly, she says to a crowd of skeptical neighbors. Her voice trembles but doesn't break. We lost the war, but we learned how to be clean. For the first time, young German girls hear that cleanliness can be a kind of freedom, not control. And older women, still clinging to the regime's moral codes, feel something inside them start to crack. As the women's stories spread, the symbol of the white pad becomes something larger. A rumor, a myth, a quiet revolution carried by whispers. And with every telling, the old propaganda shrinks further into absurdity. But not everyone welcomes this new thinking. The next wave of resistance won't come from soldiers, it'll come from pulpits and living rooms, where tradition claws back against change. By late 1948, the quiet revolution reaches the churches. Sermons echo through the ruins, warning against foreign indecency. In parishes from Munich to Hamburg, priests denounce modern women's hygiene as a symptom of moral decay. The same women who once whispered about the white pads now hide them again, not from soldiers this time, but from neighbors. Shame returns dressed in piety, but not everyone bends. The younger women, those who spent months or years in Allied camps, have seen another way to live. They remember the calm voice of the British nurse, the matter of fact tone, the absence of judgment. That memory becomes a quiet defiance. In small circles, they start to share their knowledge, how to wash, how to track their cycles, how to speak about their own bodies without whispering. These aren't protests, they're lessons. Lessons disguised as conversations over laundry tubs and shared bread. And yet, they carry more power than any pamphlet. Official reports show birth rates dropping nearly 25% across post-war Germany, not solely from loss but from choice. For the first time, women begin to understand they can decide when and how to bear children. Hygiene becomes autonomy, autonomy becomes heresy. In one church basement, a priest overhears a woman telling her friend, "Clean doesn't mean sinful." He shakes his head, muttering, "The enemy's poison runs deep." But the poison is really knowledge imported, not inflicted. A former POW nurse starts working in a small clinic outside Frankfurt. She trains younger assistants, repeating what she learned in captivity. Respect the body, it's not shameful. Her supervisors disapprove, but the patients adore her. Some call her Die Sanft, the gentle one. Meanwhile, conservative newspapers run headlines like "Our women losing their purity." But the fear is too late. The crack in the ideology has already widened into a fracture. One evening, that same nurse writes in her journal, "They told us to serve men. The British told us to serve life." She never publishes it. But her students will repeat those words for decades. And among those students, one will take her lessons further, turning quiet defiance into invention, the next stage in a silent revolution. It starts in a laboratory no bigger than a kitchen. Frankfurt, 1949. The walls smell of iodine and new paint. A small group of German doctors, mostly women, who survived the camps, are huddled over a workbench covered in cotton, rubber sheets, and glass jars. They aren't supposed to be here. Their funding is unofficial, their research barely tolerated. But they're chasing something bigger than medicine, dignity engineered. The ex-POW nurse known as Die Sanft stands at the table, sketching a diagram from memory. The British version had this layer, she says, pointing to a folded edge on the pad. Her hands move with precision learned in a camp infirmary. Around her, the others nod. They've turned their humiliation into a blueprint. Officially, Nazi purity laws are gone, but their echoes remain. Doctors still debate whether female sanitation devices are proper for respectable women. The women ignore them. They start collecting discarded Allied supplies, dissecting them, and running tests. One sample absorbs 4 times its weight in liquid. It's not witchcraft, one laughs, it's design. By 1950, the first West German patent for a menstrual product is filed under a man's name, but insiders know the truth. It's the work of these women, ex-prisoners turned pioneers. The shift from shame to science is complete. For the women involved, every test is a small act of rebellion. Each measurement erases a piece of propaganda that told them their biology was weakness. They keep records meticulously, grams absorbed, hours of use, sterilization methods. One entry reads, "Not foreign, ours now." An American reporter touring West Germany later writes, "They learned hygiene from captivity." He means it as irony, but to them it's vindication. The same nurse who once whispered lessons in a POW barrack now trains a new generation of midwives, insisting that every birth, every wound, every cycle deserves precision, not shame. "We copied what once felt alien," she says to her apprentices, "and we made it our own. Outside, the rubble is being cleared, factories rebuilt, and a new Germany is taking shape. But inside that tiny lab, a quieter reconstruction is underway, one that won't make headlines, yet will redefine womanhood for decades. And soon, the woman who began it all, the nurse from Lübeck, will be called back into history. Cologne, 1952. A city still rebuilding itself brick by brick, but the air smells of bread again instead of smoke. In a low-roofed maternity ward near the Rhine, the nurse from Lübeck walks briskly between cots, clipboard in hand, her hair now streaked with grey. The other staff call her Fräulein Arzt, though she never earned a degree. Her authority comes from experience hard, one unforgettable. 7 years earlier, she was a prisoner behind barbed wire, trembling as she mistook a sanitary pad for a bandage. Now she teaches student nurses how to use them. Cleanliness is not vanity, she says, adjusting her glasses. It's respect. Her tone is firm but gentle, the same blend she once saw in that British nurse's eyes. Across Germany, a quiet revolution is unfolding. The Allied camps have closed, but their influence lingers. Over 1 million women retrained in medical fields by 1953, according to UN reconstruction reports. Clinics are filling with female nurses, midwives, and doctors' women who once marched, now mending, and many of them trace their calling to the unlikely education they received in captivity. For the nurse, every swaddled infant, every sterilized instrument, every folded cloth is proof that humanity can be rebuilt one small, precise act at a time. Yet she never boasts about her past. When younger colleagues ask where she learned her methods, she just says from the other side. One afternoon, while sorting Red Cross mail, she finds an envelope addressed in familiar handwriting. London postmark, inside a single sheet, an invitation. International Medical Exchange, former Allied and Axis Nurses Reunion, Hamburg. She stares at it for a long time, thumb tracing the printed date. Her pulse quickens not from fear, but recognition. She hasn't seen those faces in 7 years. The British women who taught her without preaching, who changed her without intending to. That night she stands by her small apartment window, looking out over the city lights and the new bridges spanning the Rhine. She knows she'll go, not out of nostalgia, but to close a circle that began with a single act of kindness. And when she steps off the train in Hamburg weeks later, she'll walk straight into a reunion that redefines forgiveness. Hamburg, 1952. The harbour smells of salt and coal, and gulls wheel above the rooftops rebuilt from ashes. Inside a Red Cross conference hall near the docks, tables are lined with white linen and chipped teacups. Former POW nurses and British medics file in, awkward at first, unsure where to stand, unsure what to say after 7 years of silence. The nurse from Lübeck adjusts her collar, heart pounding as she scans the faces. They're older now, hairpin tight, wearing the same calm expression as before the British nurse who once handed her that mysterious pad. Their eyes meet across the room, no words yet, just a small nod that cuts through the years like a clean incision. 230 women attend the reunion, according to UN records 12 from the same camp. The chatter grows warmer as stories spill out of shortages, clinics, families rebuilt. When the British matron stands to speak, her voice trembles. "We met in war," she says, "but what we shared was care." Applause ripples gently. The German women exchange glances, some tearful, some smiling. No one expected to feel pride today. Later, over weak coffee and biscuits, the nurse from Lübeck finally speaks to her counterpart. "You taught us more than medicine," she says. The British nurse laughs softly. "We just followed the manual." But both know that's not true. Manuals don't teach compassion. Around them, conversations weave like bandages over old wounds. Laughter returns in small bursts. They compare notes how post-war hospitals were rebuilt, how training spread across both nations. One British woman admits she was afraid to meet former prisoners. "I thought you'd hate us." The reply is simple: "You treated us better than our own did." That night, the hall empties, but a few women remain. They bring out an old crate of supplies for display: canteens, uniforms, photos. At the bottom lies a folded white pad, preserved in wax paper. The room falls silent. One voice whispers, "It started with that." Heads nod. The moment holds delicate, unsentimental, real. Tomorrow that single relic will spark the final conversation. The one about what that small square of cloth truly meant. They gather around the display table in near silence. The overhead bulbs flicker softly, casting long shadows over glass cases filled with relics of survival. Ration cards, stethoscopes, faded armbands. But it's the small wax paper bundle that stops everyone cold. A white cotton pad, perfectly preserved, unused since 1945. The British nurse unwraps it carefully, her hands steady despite the tremor of age. "I never thought one of these would end up in a museum," she says. The women lean in, some smiling, some biting back tears. To anyone else, it's just gauze and stitching. To them, it's something far heavier, a symbol of how kindness can outlive conquest. Reports say the Red Cross distributed millions of hygiene items across Europe after the war. But numbers can't explain what this single piece of cotton represents. The first time many of these women were treated as human beings, not instruments of ideology. The nurse from Lübeck reaches out, brushing it gently with her fingertips. "That cloth," she murmurs, "changed how we saw ourselves." The room stills. In that instant, everyone understands she isn't speaking about the pad itself, but about what it stood for: dignity offered without demand, mercy without agenda. One of the younger British nurses, who wasn't even born during the war, asks quietly, "Was it hard to accept?" The older German women share a look before one answers. "It was harder to believe." A photographer snaps a picture. The click echoes like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Later, that photo will appear in a Red Cross archive with no caption. It won't need one. The women begin to pack up the relics, laughter mingling with the scrape of chairs. The pad is rewrapped, stored again, but its meaning feels larger now. Beyond hygiene, beyond history. It's not a medical object anymore. It's testimony. As the nurse folds the linen around it, she whispers to no one in particular, "We thought the war ended with silence, but maybe it ended here." Outside, the harbour fog thickens, horns sounding in the distance. Tomorrow, one final conversation will close this chapter, not about medicine, but about humanity itself. Morning light pours through the tall windows of the Hamburg conference hall, pale and forgiving. The reunion is ending. Chairs are stacked, teacups emptied, and laughter now lingers only as an echo. The nurse from Lübeck stands by the window, gazing out at the harbour cranes and the slow, moving ships below. She feels the same breeze she once felt through the barbed wire of a British camp, but now it smells of salt, not fear. The British nurse walks up beside her, holding the old wax paper bundle. "You kept it all these years," she says. The German woman smiles faintly. "I had to remember what mercy looked like." Neither woman speaks for a long time. Around them, Red Cross officials exchange polite farewells. One statistician mentions proudly that female POW mortality in Allied custody stayed under 2%, an unprecedented figure for the era. But the women know the real number that mattered wasn't survival, it was transformation. Dignity is a kind of victory, the German nurse finally says. Her voice is soft, but it cuts through the hum of the room like a clean scalpel. The British woman nods. You see, war's end, humanity doesn't have to. A photographer asks for one last picture. The two women stand side by side, the folded pad resting between them like a treaty made of cloth. Flashbulb, click. The moment freezes into history, grain and light and quiet defiance. When the hall empties, the nurse walks outside into the crisp Hamburg air. The world feels rebuilt, but imperfect, scarred yet breathing. Children run past, chasing a paper ball down the street. For a second, she imagines them in white coats instead of uniforms. Maybe that's the legacy, not revenge, not pride, but decency passed forward. She adjusts her coat, tucks the wax, paper bundle into her bag, and begins the long walk toward the train station. Behind her, the Red Cross flag flutters, catching sunlight against the grey sky. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings noon, and in that moment, she realizes the war didn't end the day Germany surrendered. It ended the day compassion crossed the wire.